Well, first of all, he did it under a deceptive rubric. As he claimed that this was to make the elections safe during the pandemic. And that, of course, included all the fraud practices, like massive paper ballots, drop boxes, harvesting, and the like.
So in other words, everything we saw in Dinesh D'Souza's documentary, 2000
exactly.
Mules,
if you don't,
that's what he was financing, in other words.
Anybody today who thinks that the election was not rigged is either lying to themselves or to you. There's so much massive evidence, certainly, that there was massive fraud going on. I would respect people who want to remain skeptics at the end of that as to whether it was decisive. But when the Democrats deny any fraud and want to put in jail people who question an election result, something they've done in every election that Republicans have won, then I have no patience for that. Those people are just liars.
So let's go to this then. So Mark Zuckerberg takes $400 million.
He took the
$400 million and puts it in these. Yeah.
First of all, if it was to make the voting safe during a pandemic, how hard would it have been to rent football stadiums? Every high school has an athletic field where you can have plenty of social distancing. It had nothing to do with the COVID epidemic, although that was the cover for this operation. And that's significant. When people hide their real agendas, you know there's something wrong. So the money, he put the money into two other 501c3s, which had never had more than $2.5 million before. He's pouring this $400 million into them with strings attached. It's not like he just gave them the money and says, make it safe for the pandemic. What he said was, you have to insist on mail-in ballots. Let me just back up 1 second with the mail-in ballots. In 2000, there was a contested election. The Democrats contested the election of George Bush, which, if you accept Democrat rhetoric of today, was an attack on democracy. I don't think so. I think it's correct to question elections, that we live in a democracy. What came out of that was something called the Carter-Baker Commission. Jimmy Carter was a Democrat president. James Baker was Secretary of State in the Bush administration on election reform. That's when the country was still civilized. So there was, concern about the integrity of the elections. And they came up with a series of recommendations. And for example, they said that unsolicited mail-in ballots is the chief avenue for fraud. All of the things that they said were conducive to fraud, like ballot boxes, which you can stuff, in public places, ballot harvesting, and the unsolicited paper ballots. Every one of those is an item that the Democrats pushed through state legislatures in the 6 months prior to the election, and that Mark Zuckerberg insisted. And what that came out to is this. And then he targeted Democrat areas for get out the vote. He fixed it so that there was a drop box every, I believe it was every 4 miles in Democrat areas. They would be urban areas with lots of transportation to the drop boxes. In Republican
so let's explain this.
Rural and where distances are great, it was one drop box every 1,000 square miles. What did I say? It's every 4 square miles every 1,000. And you could just go down the list of what they did. All of it. And it's all in the article that I wrote with John Perazzo for frontpagemagazine.com.
So let's explain this a bit then. The money they gave had strings attached, in other words. They were saying it's COVID money, but it had strings attached. So
Yeah,
in these strings,
things had nothing to do with COVID. They all had to do with rigging making the election process vulnerable to fraud. And it was all focused to help Democrats.
geez. Now, a couple points on this.
Now, the
IRS
is a colluder in this. The IRS is a rogue institution. Well, the whole executive branch of the government, thanks to Obama and Biden, are rogue. They're lawless, and the IRS is not enforcing its rules except against conservative. And when it does that, it denies tax exemption to religious organizations. When it does that, it's called a selective prosecution, which is illegal. That's why I say it's rogue. Everybody at the head of the IRS should be fired. I'm in a normal society we used to be, not in this
Well,
one.
that's a very bold statement that the IRS was basically complicit and committed possibly illegal acts in its cooperation.
They helped Zuckerberg to try. Let's be very conservative. To try to rig the election by focusing $400 million mainly in Democrat areas to get out the Democrat vote in battleground states. People never mention this figure, but Joe Biden won by 0.027% of the vote. I think it's the slimmest margin in election history. Out of 159 million votes, he won by 40,000 in a cluster of battleground states where Zuckerberg focused his devious practices.
Now how did the IRS collude with this? How is the IRS involved?
Because the IRS is busy going after conservative organizations if they, if they're critical of the Biden administration, they call that political, and they threaten their 501c3 status. They denied, as you may remember, during the Obama, it started in the Obama administration. Lois Lerner was the head of the IRS, and they denied over 100 conservative organizations. They refused to allow them to be tax exempt because they said they were political. So that's basically criminal. I mean, it's probably there's no law against it, but it's not what the IRS is